What's going on, you guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in this series, we'll be creating a web app, which will be like a very glorified contacts manager. So like people you were to contact, and we'll call it a leads manager to give it more of a fancy touch. But we'll be creating this using FastAPI in the backend and ReactJS in the front end. And so in the first few videos, we'll focus primarily on FastAPI and developing our backend before moving on to the front end or ReactJS work. So to begin with, what you want to be in is the directory that you want to store the project in. So in my case, it's React-FastAPI. And the first thing we need to do is make our backend folder like so, and then just cd into that. And we can go ahead and create our Python environment. So Python 3 -m venv, give that a second. And then we can go ahead and activate it. So we can do source venv bin activate like so. And you may see like a indicator as to what virtual environment you're in. So this one being the one I just created. And let me just clear that. And the next thing is to make the necessary installations. So we can do pip 3. And I have this already saved in, but what you want is pip 3 install parslib, and then in square brackets, bcrypt. That will be used for hashing the password, SQLAlchemy as our ORM for the database, FastAPI brackets all, and pyjwt for creating our JWT tokens. So yeah, I'll just give that a second. I'll give you that guys a second to type that all in. But those should be the installations. I may be missing out on one, but this should be this will get us going. And then just hit enter. Give it a second to install it. But yeah, once you have all that installed, we can go ahead and open our backend directory in VS Code. So I'm just going to do code period. So yeah, once you're on VS Code, let's go ahead and create the files that we need. So it's a lot like this whole next few videos were very similar to the FastAPI SQLAlchemy video I did a while back. And if you have any if you want that in more detail, I definitely recommend checking that out. But the first thing that we need is, of course, the init.py file, the main.py file. We also need the models.py, database.py, schemas.py, and I guess finally just a services file. But that should be it. We just close that. And yeah, so to begin with, let's go ahead and start up by writing in our database.py file. So I'm just going to close everything else. As in our database.py file, we'll be creating our interface with the actual database. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and make the necessary imports first. So import SQLAlchemy as _SQL, import SQLAlchemy.ext.declarative as _declarative, like so. Import SQLAlchemy.orm as _orm. And then let's go ahead and create our database URL. So we can say database _URL, and that'll just be the path to the SQLite database that we'll be making use of. So SQLite : // so 3 forward slashes, and then /database.db. And yeah, I'm getting this message here to install Black. It's just a Python formatter. I'm going to go ahead and click yes. But yeah, that should be it. yeah, and like if you didn't have that, like what you can do is just like go ahead and pip install it, like pip install and then black like so, and that should do the job. But yeah, that's that. And we can now go ahead and create our engine. So engine equals sql.createEngine, and we'll pass in the database URL, and we'll say connect_args, and we'll put check_same thread, and we'll set that to false. I think this is only necessary for like SQLite databases. Otherwise, like you don't really need that. And then we'll create our class session local, which will be orm dot session maker, and we can say auto commit equals false, auto flush equals false, and we'll bind it to the engine that we just created. And lastly, we'll say base, which we'll inherit from when creating our models, is _declarative, and then declarative _base. And that's it. That's really it for the database. We'll now go ahead and create our models. So in the models.py file, we need to create two models, the user model and our lead / contact model. So the first thing is, let's import date time as _dt, and then import on another line, import SQLAlchemy as _SQL, import SQLAlchemy.orm as _orm, and we can also import the passlib that we downloaded earlier, so passlib.hash as _hash, and you'll see why we need this in a second. So for our user, we can say class user is the we also need to import database, and yeah, that we created, import database as _database. But now we can go ahead and create our user model. So our user database will inherit from base that we created here on line 11. And the first thing is we'll just create a table name, and that will be users. We'll also say we'll need an ID, and the ID will be a SQLAlchemy column or SQL column, and that will be of type integer. And then it will be a primary key, and we'll set index to true. Next, we'll have the email. You also notice that the like the user model is very simple. If you want to add, like, say, a name or a last name, etc., feel free to do that. But I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible for this. And we'll set index to true as well. And lastly will be the password. So it will be a hash password, so it will be appropriate to name it that. SQL column, which will be a string, like so, and that's it. And yeah, of course, we're not going to be storing the password in its original form. We will be hashing it to, for security reasons. And next, we just need to create a function that will verify the password. So we'll say verify password self and then password, which is a string, and this will return _hash.bcrypt.verify, and we'll say the password that we're passing in as a parameter and the self.hash password. And this will basically check the password that we we send for authentication versus the actual hash password for the user, and make sure that they match up through this verify function. All that's taken care of in bcrypt. So now that we have this, we need to go ahead and create our leads model. So our leads model, we can just say class lead and then database dot base. We can take these two here, like the ID and table name, and just change it. Change table name to leads. ID will stay the same. We need an owner ID, so like which user this lead belongs to, and we'll say SQL.column underscore SQL integer, and it will be SQL.foreign key to the users.id, like so. We'll say first name is again a column, and it's a string. Index is true, and I just copy that down here, but instead of first name we'll say last name, and then we can also have a email. So I'm just copying it a couple times. So email, and this again will be a string, and the index will be set to true. We'll have a company, so which company this lead works for. However, we don't want, you may have a case where, you know, like the lead that you add in doesn't actually belong to a company, let's say for whatever reason. So we'll set the default to an empty string, and we'll do a note, so a little side note for each lead. Say column underscore SQL string, and we'll say default equals an empty string. And you know, there's no need to index a note. A note in this case could be like, you know, like call this person or talk about this or etc. Like just a little bit of extra information. And then we'll say date created, and this will be underscore SQL, and then column, and then it will be of type datetime, like so, and the default is underscore dt datetime dot utc now. So this dt, if you remember, is coming from this import here. But that should actually, no, the last thing that we need is date last updated, so you can keep track of, you know, like the updates that have been made for a lead. Date last updated, like so, and that will just be the same as date created. But now we can go back to our user model, and we can just associate leads as orm.relationship, and that will be a lead, and back populates owner. And down here in the lead model, we can say owner is orm underscore orm dot relationship, and we'll say user back populates leads, like so. And that should be it for our models. So we have our user model, we have the lead model, and yeah, with all the information. Feel free to add any extra information that you want, but I'm gonna go with this. And so the next thing is to create our schemas. And so back in here, we can jump into the schemas file, and let's go ahead and make the necessary imports. So first we need the date time as underscore dt, and then we can import pedantic as underscore pedantic. So the first thing is, let's create our schemas for our user. So let's create a parent class, which we'll use to inherit. So pedantic.base model, like so. And this will just have the email. Then we can say the user create model, pedantic.base model, and this will take a hashed, as well as the email, I have the hashed password, like that. It will be a string, class config, and we'll set ORM mode to true. And if a lot of this is very unfamiliar, again, I recommend checking out an earlier video I did a while back on SQLAlchemy with FastAPI. So now that we have the user create, we can just create our standard user class. And user create does not, inherit from pedantic, inherits from user base. The same goes for the user model as well. So in our user model, we'll also have the ID as well as the email, and we'll say class config and ORM_mode equals true, like so. So that's the schema set up for our user. And next we can go ahead and create one for our leads. So let's create a lead base, which will inherit from pedantic base model. And we'll have the first name, which is a string. And let's just duplicate that a few times. Instead of first name, now we'll have last name. We'll have the email. We'll have the company. And we'll also have the note. So that's when that'll just be the standard that we'd have for lead base. And it'll also be the same for when creating a lead. So we'll say lead create, and that will inherit from lead base. And we'll just say pass here. And yeah, so the next thing is to just do the general lead itself. So we can say class lead, again, inherits from lead base. But aside from first name, last name, email, company, note, we'll also include the ID. We'll have the owner_ID. We'll have the date created, which will be a datetime object. We'll also have the date last updated, which will be _dt.datetime, like so. And we'll just say class config ORM mode equals true. So just as a quick overview, our user create is the information that we'll be sending to, or we'll be posting to. So for example, when creating a user, as hopefully the name suggests, we'll be sending the email and the password. When actually getting back a user, we'll get back the ID and the email. You know, we don't want to return the hashed password, just the email and ID. For creating a lead, we'll just be sending the first name, last name, email, company, and note. You're probably wondering why are we also sending the user that's created this lead. And the reason is because you'll see later on that only authenticated users will be able to create a lead, and based on the authenticated user, it will create that lead. And yeah, so the actual lead itself will return, along with the first name to note, will also return the ID, owner ID, date created, and date last updated. But that's really it. So we have our database interface, we have our models, and we also have our schemas. The next thing that we want to add is in our services file, we want to create a function that just creates the database. So to do that, we need to jump into services.py, and let's go ahead and just first import database as _database, like so. And we'll do create database, and that will just return underscore database dot base dot metadata dot create underscore all, and then bind underscore database dot engine. And that should really be it. So what we can do now is in our terminal, you can open that up and you can go ahead and jump into a Python shell. We can import services, and then we can do services dot create database. I just hit tab to autocomplete, hit enter. But before you do, you'll notice something here in our file explorer. You'll see a database.db file being created once running this. So just hit enter, and there you go. You have this database.db. But that's really it. That basically sums up the creation of our models and also the setting up of our schemas. In the next video, we'll start looking at how we can create a user and also jump into authentication. But other than that, hopefully this video added some value, and I hope to see you in the next video.